We're about to turn this into this. Stay tuned for Floor.tv. Now that we're over the halfway mark with the subfloor, we can simply make a few measurements to square off the room so that we can get our starting row. Now that we have the room squared off, all we have to do is pull a string line from mark to mark, from wall to wall, stretching across the room as you can see here. Then we'll make intermittent marks along that string line that we can later use to snap our chalk line. This chalk line will be where the first row of maple is fastened to the floor. Now we simply just lay down some of our extra sheets parallel to that line that we just snapped. This will be the backer for what is called our rack once we start to lay out the maple. As you can see here, it's a pretty simple process. Once this is done, then we just simply start to throw out all of the hardwood. Each one of the bundles that you can see here holds about 20 square feet of flooring. We start from the left side, working to the right. That's how the wood's milled. It's meant to go from left to right. Then we just keep working our way across the room till eventually we hit the wall on the right side. Any extra material is put back in the stack. Then you get what we have here. The entire first half of the gym is stocked with maple. The starting row is ready to go, and now we can start racking floor. After we take a break, of course. Now we start the process of what we call racking the floor. Essentially, racking is predetermining where the maple will be nailed. So essentially, we're just finding a place to put it that it fits, staggering the joints properly and getting us the proper spacing that we need. Working left to right across the floor, we prearrange the boards to make it easier for us to nail them into place later. This drastically improves the quality of the floor since you are predetermining where the boards are going to be, and you're almost guaranteed that the majority of the joints are going to be properly spaced for the nailing process. It's very important that these joints are properly spaced throughout the floor to give it strength and durability. If there's too many common joints or close joints or joints that are aligned with one another, it severely weakens the floor. Here's an example of how it looks after it's racked. And here's an example of the stand-up rows that we use to gain space as the floor gets farther from us. And here's another angle of those same rows. We rack the ends a little bit different to give us advantage when we are cutting them to place the final board. And here's an example of how far the joints are staggered. There's not really a one-size-fits-all method for doing this, and every single floor layer has kind of adapted their own particular style to doing the racking process. So once we've actually got the ends racked and the final board placed, it looks about like this. Or at least this is the way that we prefer to do it. Makes it a lot easier for us. And once we're done racking, we have a rack. At this point, we can get out our hardwood guns and start to nail it. But first we have to check to make sure we're in the right temperature and humidity range for the floor. And we also need to take an average moisture content of the maple to make sure that we're in the acceptable ranges for this particular region. Looks like we're good. At this point, we're going to get out our hardwood nail guns and get all of our equipment plugged in to the compressors and get everybody set up so that we can start nailing down the floor. Now that we've nailed a couple stand-up rows, we need to stop and check the floor for straightness and make sure everything's going according to the plan before we proceed. Here's a look at the end as the cutoffs are being done. This staggering method makes it much easier for the guy on the end to keep up with the rest of the group. Then we just simply continue this process until we get to the wall. Here's a look at what the nailed floor looks like. Good staggered joints, nice color. This process might look easy, but trust me, it's not. Here's a look at the first chunk of floor that we've got done. Now we're getting pretty close to the wall, so we're set up for another rack. Here's a look at the end, all the way to the wall. At this point, we've got the rest of this side racked all the way to the wall. The color looks great. But first, we're going to clear out this area on the other side of the floor. Get it nice and cleaned up, because it's a mess as you can clearly see, so that we can get it ready to pull out vapor barrier. Now make sure you don't cover up your volleyball sleeves, and make sure you cut a hole in them so that you can get to them later. Once the plastic's pulled out, it looks just about like this. Now this is the whole area ready for subfloor. When you're pulling down the visqueen, you want to make sure to lap it at least 2 feet and seal it. Now that the vapor barrier is in place and all of our material is moved up against the wall and out of the way, giving us an area to work, as you can see, we can now proceed to start working on the bottom layer and the top layer. Once the top sheets are in place, they then have to be stapled down, but there's a particular way to do this. Now that we've got the subfloor fastened down, we can focus on the other side of the floor again where this hardwood still needs to be nailed. And we proceed further. We're almost to the wall. Just enough time to take a selfie. You gotta have fun on the job, right? It's always very important to keep your eye on the weather, especially when rainstorms roll in. These rainstorms, if there's a leak in the roof or in a doorway, can completely ruin your floor. Plus, it brings the humidity up, which can damage the wood. It's very important to keep records every single day of the conditions of the job site. Now that we've hit the wall, it's time to do pull-ups. And once the last few rows are buttoned down, we cut an expansion gap of 2 inches across the wall. Pick out the pieces that you cut off so that you have a perfect gap just like this, so that the floor can expand and contract over time. Then of course we're going to take a break because that was a lot of hard work. Now the first side of the floor is completely finished. Here's another shot. And it's time for yet another selfie. So I hope you've enjoyed part 2 of this 4-part series. Stay tuned for part 3 is coming up. I appreciate you watching. Have a good day.